On May 29, 1851, at the Women's Rights Convention in Akron, Ohio, Sojourner Truth gave a speech called
"Ain't I a woman?"
giving her thoughts and views surrounding the feminist movement.
"Nobody ever helps me in the carriages or over mud puddles or gives me in the best place. Ain't I a woman?"
During her Ain't I a Woman speech, Sojourner Truth addressed how women, theoretically, should receive the same rights as men regardless of race. Even though this was the ideology, it was not put into practice among the Caucasian women of the first feminist movement.
So many conventions, but not one single invitation went out to black women.
According to an article by American Civil Liberties Union, women from across the country gathered at the convention. When suffragists gathered in Seneca Falls, New York in July 1848, they advocated for the right of white women to vote. The participants were middle and upper class white women, a handful of white men supporters, and one African American male, Frederick Douglass. Yet there were no black women at the convention, for none were invited.
Elizabeth Cady Stanton says at the State Women's Rights Convention held at Albany, New York, in February 1854, educated, virtuous white women were more worthy of the vote. Throughout the address, she continuously discusses how married white women are mistreated and need the same rights as men. She never discusses anything concerning women of color and how they face both racism and sexism. Black women were not invited to any conventions, cast aside, and now white feminism existed. It was as if they weren't women at all. Emma Gray from the Huffington Post describes white feminism as,
basically, white feminism is feminism that ignores intersectionality.
After researching about white feminism, my group headed out to the Women's March on January 19th of 2019 in Washington, D.C. We interviewed 2 women from the NAACP and heard their opinion on white suffrage.
Feminism and the Women's March was actually started for white women, and women of color are very underrepresented, so that's why I'm here.
Although the definition of feminism from Merriam-Webster Dictionary is a theory of the political, economic, and social equality of the sexes, this wasn't always the case in the feminist movement.
The women's suffrage movement, it really did not include black women or even women from all walks of life.
In schools from a young girl, I always heard that Susan B. Anthony was the woman that got me my rights. But how true was that?
They have perpetuated idealized versions of Anthony and her white colleagues, such as Carrie Chapman Catt and Elizabeth Cady Stanton. Evidence of their ruthless racial bias has been pushed to the shadows, enabling the erasure of their women of color counterparts who also fought tirelessly for the right to vote. Susan B. Anthony only appeared to care about black people when the status quo was in her favor.
Susan B. Anthony, an abolitionist, Quaker, and feminist activist, is thought to be a feminist hero and icon. However, she was misrepresented in the media. Instead, she showed racist tendencies towards women of color.
An example of this would be when Susan B. Anthony says in a meeting with Frederick Douglass in 1866, "I will cut off my right arm before I will ever work or demand the ballot for the Negro and not the woman." Saying this stirred tensions and problems arose between black and white feminists, including Ida B. Wells. The 15th Amendment of 1870 gave African American men the right to vote. Even though this was in the Constitution, not all African American men had the ability to exercise it. Susan B. Anthony said when having a meeting with Ida B. Wells in 1897, when a group of colored women came and asked that I come to them and aid them in forming a branch of the suffrage association among the colored women, I declined to do so on the grounds that I didn't agree. And you think I was wrong in doing so? Ida B. Wells said that she was wrong for not including women of color in the feminist movement and segregating others as such.
The 19th Amendment of 1921 gave women the right to vote. Although it gave women the right to vote, not all women could vote due to racism and demographics. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 did not grant the right to vote. If you are lynched, arrested, beaten, or murdered, it is hardly possible for women of color to exercise the right to vote. Instead, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 granted the protection to exercise the right in order to vote. What is a right if you can't exercise it without the fear of being killed? As said in the Globe and Mail video,
when you look back in history, you will see how white feminism has influenced our policies and the way we approach issues of gender equity in society. White women were first granted the vote in 1921. Women of color weren't allowed to vote until the 1940s. Indigenous women weren't even allowed to vote until the 1960s. So to address this problem, your feminism must be intersectional. Intersectionality is acknowledging how different parts of our identities shape our experiences and the way we move through our world. These identities include race, class, sexual orientation, gender identity, and even religion.
The fourth feminist wave, created in 2012, is a social media-driven influence movement with the goal of mainly ending sexual harassment, body shaming, and rape culture. Now all women and men are reuniting, creating a new wave. We have become stronger together. The sign of strength of a group is by how far they have come. The feminist movement has overcome by having the right to vote. Now that women can vote and have equal rights, women have achieved a common goal and have gone way farther. If Caucasian women didn't exclude women of color, the United States and the first feminist wave would have pursued the true goal and definition of feminism: equality for all sexes. As said by Jamie Turner,
White women are at fault, but I feel like a lot of other people play a part in it.
The feminist movement was and still is a turning point in history. It changed our ideology of women throughout the years. However, we cannot deny the many flaws in this movement.
Now, women of color are fighting for life or death situations, whether it is the fear of being deported, shootings of young Black Americans, lower minimum wages than Caucasian women, trying not to be seen as terrorists, to not be targeted by hate groups or racism, and to practice their religion without persecution.
Women have made history by taking over the seats in the House of Representatives, creating an influential #MeToo movement, and advocating to end all sexual violations for peoples.
As said in the Globe and Mail video,
I haven't fully felt comfortable within or as being titled a feminist. Feminism has a history of being racist, as well as a history of being very exclusionary to people of different sexual identities, people of different classes, and people of different ethnicities. So the reason why I now call myself a feminist is because I want to disrupt that space.